In the opening scene, Mason Pettits openly acknowledges that he grew up without a clear sense of purpose. Like most individuals, he engaged in typical activities and pursued commonly desired goals. Seeking a new direction, Mason made impulsive decisions, enlisting in the military and becoming a special forces operative, despite having only a year left in law school. This choice finally provided him with a mission that brought him happiness. Mason married Jenny, and they had a daughter named Casey. During a mission to eliminate a man named Venegas, Mason not only lost his life's purpose, but also lost his comrades. Disillusioned, he left the military and pursued a career as a lawyer, even though he hadn't completed law school. In the present, Mason is on his way to drop off Casey at school. The small girl informs him about a persistent boy trying to kiss her, and Mason instructs her to defend herself by punching the boy in the throat if it happens again. After dropping off Casey, Mason heads to work. His office is visited by an old friend named Sebastian Earle, who controls a company called Contracted Defense Initiatives, CDI. Sebastian hires Mason to provide security for journalist Claire Wellington, who is heading for an exclusive interview with President Venegas. Despite Mason's reservations due to the painful memories associated with Venegas, he eventually agrees when Sebastian offers a substantial sum of money. Returning home, Mason discovers that Jenny was summoned by the school principal due to Casey's altercation with the boy. This incident adds strain to their troubled marriage, but Jenny eventually decides to let Mason take the job, hoping it might be the key to his happiness and self-repair. Mason meets journalist Claire Wellington, and after introductions, they head directly to the airport. Claire briefs Mason on his role, emphasizing the need for him to defend her at all costs. Upon landing, Venegas greets Claire with a kiss on the cheek, while Mason undergoes an extensive security search. During their journey, Mason is surprised to learn that Venegas has done research on him, knowing he is a former armed forces operative. As they travel on a bridge, the security car in front of them explodes, leading to an ambush by rebels attempting to assassinate Venegas. Mason approaches the wrecked security car and pulls out a massive revolver. Venegas urges Mason to assist in protecting him, revealing it as a planned coup. Mason refuses, claiming that Venegas's own people are behind the attempted assassination. He walks away, followed by Claire, and they head into the bush to escape. Mason contacts Sebastian for assistance, and Sebastian assures him that they have their location and will send a chopper. Venegas requests to use the phone after the call, but Mason declines. In response, Venegas threatens Mason with arrest for being a foreign spy. Mason, in turn, pulls out a gun, threatening Venegas. Claire intervenes, persuading Mason to assist Venegas. Venegas calls his nephew, Jorge, who is surprised to learn that Venegas is still alive. Venegas is aware that Jorge is the mastermind behind the coup, but assures him of his well-being. Claire is shocked to discover that Venegas's own nephew is working with the rebels, but Venegas adds that Jorge is being exploited because he is an imbecile. Despite the revelation, Venegas urges Mason and Claire to help him protect his people. However, Mason walks away, followed by Claire, leaving Venegas alone. Claire attempts to persuade Mason to assist Venegas so that she can document everything, but Mason remains resolute in his decision not to aid Venegas. Claire is puzzled by Mason's apparent anger towards Venegas. As Mason watches the chopper fly away after dropping off two shooters, he realizes that they are not there to help them. The gunmen pursue them, and the chopper fires shots at them as they flee. They come to a stop in a clearing near a fallen tree, and Mason strategically positions a sniper to await the helicopter. Meanwhile, Claire stands back, recording every unfolding event. Mason successfully snipes the pilot, and they escape into the woods just as the chopper crashes. Claire keeps running until she realizes she has lost Mason. Shouting for him, she is confronted by the two gunmen. Hiding behind a tree and clutching a branch, she silently waits for one of the rebels to approach the tree she is hiding in. Unexpectedly, Mason appears and engages in combat with the rebel. Claire watches as Mason chokes the rebel to death. Emerging from her hiding place, Claire finds Mason facing her, but a rebel smacks him on the head. Venegas arrives and shoots the rebel, leaving them stranded. Meanwhile, Jorge and his crew inspect the wrecked chopper. A car pulls up, and Colonel Juan arrives to warn Jorge about his failure to assassinate Venegas. Colonel Juan murders one of Jorge's soldiers, and Jorge swears to make amends. Returning to Mason's group, the trio halts by the river to relax. Claire approaches Mason for a discussion and learns about his recent expedition. Mason shares the story of the plane crash in the same area and how he lost his comrades. After a brief respite, Venegas leads Mason and Claire to a village and introduces them to the village chief and Pino, the village chief's son-in-law. The trio decides to stay in the village until the next day. Venegas and Claire plan to conduct an exclusive interview. During the conversation, they discuss Venegas's attempted assassination, with Venegas explaining his belief that corporations are behind the attempt. Outsiders have exploited Paldonia's land and mineral riches, and corporations stand to gain billions from newly discovered lanthanides. These rare earth metals are crucial to new technology. Venegas refused to let them be exploited, leading to the attempts on his life. Mason, who has been filming the interview, gradually realizes that Venegas may not be as ruthless as initially thought. Mason wakes Claire up the next morning and informs her they need to leave. Claire hesitates, wanting to learn the complete tale of the Paldonian insurrection. When Venegas enters the room, he encourages Mason to stay and discover the truth. He indicates that he knows why Mason was sent to protect Claire. Mason calls Sebastian, learning that he had been instructed to dispatch a man to kill Venegas. Sebastian chose Mason, assuming he would want to exact revenge for the loss of his colleagues. Mason ends the call without uttering any further words. He dials Jenny on his home phone, expressing his gratitude and affection while requesting a safe return. Pulling out his gun, he approaches Venegas after the conversation. Instead of shooting Venegas, who is with Claire, Mason walks past them, gathering his belongings. He informs Claire that they are leaving when Colonel Jan and his troops arrive. The group flees, but Venegas, noticing rebels attacking the village, comes out of hiding. Claire persuades Mason to assist Venegas, as Colonel Jan will likely kill the villagers. Mason and Venegas manage to flee, but Claire is apprehended. Unable to defeat Colonel Jan and his rebels, Mason and Venegas focus on saving Claire. Spending the night in a church, they later meet Van Aus's trusted acquaintance, Bobby, seeking his assistance. The next day, Mason departs after speaking with Bobby to meet with Colonel Jan, while Venegas remains hidden. Mason and Colonel Jan stand in a seemingly calm village, guns aimed at each other. One of Colonel Jan's rebels forces Claire to her knees, threatening her with a gun. Colonel Jan demands Venegas's surrender, threatening Mason with death. Mason begs for Venegas to come out, and Venegas emerges with a smug look, followed by a swarm of civilians surrounding Colonel Jan's crew. The rebels are encircled and defenseless, allowing the trio to easily escape through a secret entrance. Infiltrating Venegas's office in the palace where Jorge is, Claire records as Venegas speaks to Jorge. Venegas warns Jorge that the rebels would dispose of him once they obtain what they want. Venegas offers to save Jorge from the rebels, and the two embrace. General Martinez enters the room, seemingly for a polite conversation, but he pulls out a gun and shoots Venegas. Mason grabs Claire to keep her safe while Venegas shoots General Martinez, revealing a bulletproof vest. Their joy is short-lived as they discover Jorge has been shot. Venegas cradles Jorge as he dies in his arms. Paldonia troops storm into the room, pointing rifles at Venegas. Venegas talks to the soldiers, assuring them that he is not the enemy and wants to help his people. Colonel Jan's rebels approach slowly, standing close behind the Paldonia soldiers. When Venegas points toward the rebels, the Paldonia soldiers turn around, exchanging fire with the rebels. Mason, Claire, and Venegas shelter behind a desk, with Claire still filming everything. A war breaks out inside the palace, and Mason defends Claire and even Venegas. Colonel Jan and one of his men chase the trio while the Paldonia soldiers and the rest of the rebels are fighting. Mason orders Venegas and Claire to go first, staying behind to battle Colonel Jan. Colonel Jan pins Mason to the ground, revealing that he, not Venegas, killed Mason's buddies. Struggling, Colonel Jan attempts to kill Mason, but Claire arrives and knocks him unconscious. The pair joins Venegas and the Paldonia soldiers, who are being outnumbered by the rebels. Mason grabs a gun and opens fire on the insurgents, while Claire and Venegas watch in astonishment. Sebastian and his men drive through the gate, assisting Mason and the Paldonia soldiers in defeating the retreating rebels. The war ends, and Claire reveals the entire truth about Venegas and Paldonia to the world. The palace is repaired, and Venegas has the chance to tell his story before the interview begins. Venegas thanks Claire and Mason for their assistance, especially Claire, who made it possible for the world to witness the truth. The interview begins and is broadcast worldwide. Mason returns home from his job in Paldonia, warmly greeted by his wife and daughter. A text from Venegas informs him of a small gift, turning out to be a large sum of money transferred to Mason's bank account. Mason smiles, walking back to his car where his wife and daughter are waiting, inviting them to spend the remainder of the day enjoying his happy family. Thanks for watching, and if you're new, don't forget to subscribe for more recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.